All right. So we are joined today by a very special guest, a prolific writer, creative individual, fun to talk to, Anders Fager. How was that?
That was great, thank you.
Excellent.
You're very flattered. You got my name right.
Yes. And that's it, folks. That's my victory for today.
It turns into Fagger in French, which is kind of sounds like some weird cheese.
I would order it. I think that would be a good cheese to get. So next time I'm at the grocery store. But yeah, you have a plethora of books, and you've been writing for quite some time, and you even teach writing. Yeah. So it's really interesting, kind of interviewing someone who, well, at least from my perspective, it sounds like you've done a lot in just kind of the non-TTRPG hobby, just with books, short stories. For Goddess is really awesome in Swedish, but going to be translated in English, yes, soon?
It is translated, but we haven't, since the plague happened, we haven't quite gotten around to when it should be published. So we sat in the fall with the translation, and it turned out really brilliant. It's like some kind of early Clive Barker-ish Gothic opera thing. It's really all the meat hooks and black leather coats you ever wanted from Kult.
Yeah, basically like a Saturday night for some people.
Yeah.
And I got to read some of it, the little intro demo copy that you sent, which was amazing. Started off really strong. But for people who, especially my fellow English speakers, why should they go out and buy or pre-order this book right now?
They should buy For the Love of Goddess, because it's absolutely brilliant, and it's a very sort of trippy take on the Kult universe. It's very technical, very sort of Burroughs or almost like The Naked Lunch or something. Mm-hmm. But it has that quality, and it's also quite a lot of homage to Barker, which felt nice to do, since he was one of the people who sort of really inspired me to write the way I do, though I don't write like him. The way he sort of threw horror out in the streets and brought a lot of sex and gore in a very sort of clever way. So I was very inspired by him. So it was nice to do something that is sort of, here's my roots.
Yeah. So, you say that, kind of like Clive Barker, but obviously your own unique style to it. And a lot of it is kind of this horror associated with sex and passion. But how would you describe your personal signature as you write that kind of distinguishes yourself from your predecessors?
I've said I've done a lot of work in Lovecraft's universe. And usually my punchline there is, what would happen if James Ellroy got around to write a Lovecraft story? Mm-hmm. It's sort of very modern prose, very kitchen sink realistic, but Cthulhu is still there, and the deep ones and all that. And it takes place in Sweden, sort of, crime land Sweden. You all know from all these crime novels you read. So it's that is sort of my kitchen sink horror in Sweden. There will be one short story out this fall on the pub is called Vanakort. It's a collection of short stories from all over the world. There's an Italian guy named Mussolini, I think, in it. And it's a Finnish friend of mine, and there's people from all over the globe, actually.
Wow, that sounds interesting. Is it will it be in Swedish or possibly translated into English?
It will be out. It will be out in English. It's a publisher in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, nice. I've been
so
there.
That is sort of welcome to the rest of the world horror.
Which is something that, especially like in nowadays, finding horror in other countries and how they approach it has been amazing because there's so much out there. And you've been writing horror in Sweden for some time. So what do you think is kind of if there is any, the unique distinction of like Sweden's footprint on horror?
I think we're a bit like the Brits to you Americans. We're very good at stealing stuff from you and selling it back to you, and you say, "Oh, we've never seen this before." like Beatles and the Stones and the Zeppelin did with the blues. They sort of came back with it and said, "You never heard this before."
Perfect.
So we're cultural mongrels. We're very good at imitating and sort of selling you guys Minecraft, and you never thought you wanted that. No, and it's the same with a lot of computer games and the music industry, and also of course all these crime novels and the role-playing games. We sort of steal stuff and sell it back to people. That's what we're good at. I mean, we think we're very Anglo-Saxon, but we aren't, which of course makes us a bit exotic. I think we are, together with South Korea, the largest exporter of pop culture per capita.
Wow.
So that's sort of a weird little country.
I know. I mean, for me, who loves tabletop role-playing games, and finding out like almost every good one that I have and love comes from Sweden, between Helmcast and Frilagen and Riot Minds. A lot of great companies, a lot of great innovators there. And
Tales from the Loop, not the least, which is not a retro thing. It's a new thing that was immensely successful.
Oh yeah, let me.
It's the blue one.
Oh my gosh. I like how you can find my own books better than I can.
There it is, people. Simon Stålenhag's setting, the Tales from the Loop. Yes, great stuff. And
Yeah, cultural phenomena. I mean, between the art, the writing, and the TV series that came out, it just grew in ways that I don't think anyone really expected.
No, I mean, he's a one-man army. He lives like 75 meters from me.
Oh, he does?
It's insane, actually. We can sort of lean out of our windows and wave to each other.
Oh, okay. Wave to him for me real quick. Just be like, hey, Mitchell says.
Mitchell says hello, yeah.
Yes. And you wrote for Tales from the Loop, right?
Yeah, I've written for Tales from the Loop. I've written a story there called Mummies in the Mist, which got very, very nice reviews because I think I wasn't. I think I went a bit darker than the other ones.
Your other stories, just in general, or just the other stories in Tales from the Loop?
Compared to the other Tales from the Loop stories, they're a bit more like let's play Stranger Things.
Yeah.
But this, I think, when I read it afterwards, I realized that okay, this is a much darker, scarier story. But it turned out very nice, and it's sort of a take on a childhood thing that happened when I went to school.
Oh, I mean, you have to, if it's okay with you, please elaborate.
Right, perhaps we'll talk about the wrong game, but we can take that one briefly. When 70s Sweden was very bleak, and we were we had one public TV channel, and it was black and white. And all of a sudden, they started to show, once a week, they show these old, 30s horror movies, American ones, The Werewolf, Bela Lugosi's Dracula, and all these. And people started to see werewolves in the countryside. And in the suburb where I lived, we had the Mummy, who sort of went on rampages in the night.
Oh, that must have been terrifying.
Yeah, I was like 12 or 11. I was scary. That was scary. And we also got in the same period, we had a comic, a comic book or comic magazine publisher who brought in a lot of these, black and white, what they're called, with Vampirella and the Crypt Keeper, all these sort of short stories.
Oh, yeah. Kind of like anthology TV shows.
Tales from the Crypt kind of comics, and Dracula, and that was how the way down horror lane started for me.
Ooh. How is it kind of, since you've been able to kind of jump between Helmcast and Footy Log, and how do you approach writing for Cults and then going back or going forward to writing Tales from the Loop?
It's sort of, every new system you sit down to work with, you have to sort of get your head around the idea. And it's very different because I wrote a compilation of short stories for Mutant Year Zero. And Mutant Year Zero is just we have mutated pigs. Yeah, okay, let's go. It's that simple. It was just like I've always been there all the time. But Cult took a bit of thinking, because Cult, and that comes to Sandwich anthology. Cult is sort of, in a way, anything you want from a 90s horror show thrown into a big heap, and then you have the Sisters of Mercy as a soundtrack, and The Cure, and everybody's wearing leather coats, and it's all like, very, very 90s.
Yeah.
So that was hard to figure out, what in this mess of things should I work with? And it's kind of fun because the driver, the scenario is very sort of a staged thing that could be it can literally happen in any role-playing game with a terror touch to it. You can do it in whatever you like, but the novel is very much, I wanted to get away from Hellraiser. I wanted to get away from, investigators and people going mad. So I thought, what is the highest stakes? Let's do a story about the gods, because there are gods in it. So the people in the book are Tifereth, which is actually the sort of goddess of communication or something like that. She's one of the major players in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Spider in the middle of the web. And then it's the Tiffany Redder character, which is her sort of prime minion. Her I think it's called Lictor.
Yeah.
They're sort of demigod-ish, live forever, meat hooks everywhere kind of. And they have a fight over a boy they both love, or they want to get his attention. That's more or less, and that boy might be Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, or someone like that.
Oh, let's get them on the phone, and I want that anthology movie. I would love to see that.
It will be a great movie. So it was fun. I sort of find the high stakes in it instead of because often when you write for a role-playing game, there is this big setting with gods, and there's a long backstory, and there's been empires here and empires there, and dark powers, and in the end you sit there, shall we open this door?
Yeah.
It's very sort of, that's a problem with the role-playing game, the perspective. And writing a book about the role-playing game experience of Cult
sounds tough. Yeah,
it is, because it is another media, of course. It's when you transfer computer games to books, or computer games to comics or whatever. It sort of needs a bit of twerking because in the game you have a story without the main character.
Yeah.
Which is sort of how role-playing games work.
It's tough. I mean, how because you have been writing for a while, and how was it when you first kind of moved over to the tabletop writing experience, and kind of how did you have to change your perspective when trying to write for that?
I wrote tons of things when I was a kid, and I played a local version of basic role playing, which was called it was sort of one of these things Riot Minds do these days. but so the sort of the idea to write scenarios wasn't that far-fetched. But since I had improved a lot as a writer since then, it was sort of the trick was to figure out, okay, how do I apply what I know today to what I knew when I was 17, which was kind of an interesting transfer or sort of, yeah, you understand what I mean.
Yeah, and you, of course, teach writing. Do you teach exclusively just, I guess, book writing, or do you also kind of teach TTRPG writing as well?
I haven't taught for sort of games properly, but a lot of the people who have been students of mine have sort of this open wall into the game environment. Some work for Paradox, the computer game company, and some work for Fria Ligan. So this is sort of a bleed in between there.
Yeah.
And some work for the film industry and for TV. So it's the media. Though the main focus of my classes is to write books. You can apply the skill to other disciplines, but you have to sort of understand what changes.
Yeah. And what does change?
For instance, in a role-playing game, you don't have a main character.
Yeah.
Which is the obvious thing, of course. So you haven't got a clue what they will do, actually.
It's just kind of like...
Yeah. It's a bit like herding cats. You have to convince them to sort of move in the right direction. And that is very simple if they're in a dungeon complex, because there's a limited number of doors to open. But if they're in downtown Arkham and, okay, what do we do now? There's millions of possibilities.
And what's kind of one, like, if you could wrap out all your experience in writing and kind of boil it down to the greatest tip that you can provide to any aspiring writer, especially in horror, what would it be?
If you talk about horror or the games in general, or
just horror, like horror books specifically.
I think an important thing is to it's not a joke. It will be a joke anyway, eventually, because that is how the human mind works. We have turned Alien into a plushie.
Yeah, plushie.
And that is how we handle horror. The human mind wants to sort of insult and bring it down to a bearable level. We haven't done that with Humphrey Bogart because he's not scary. He's still an icon.
Yeah,
but to make the scary part of the thing he writes existent, scary, so you don't have to joke about it. Be dead serious. Never blink into the camera and like all this very modern irony that this was a joke from Star Trek. Did you get it? Just do your utmost to scare people silly, and love your characters. Be serious about it, because seriousness and honesty does pay off.
Yeah. Have you seen any changes in horror over the years? Kind of the new material and what people are afraid of now?
Yeah, it changes constantly because we are afraid of different things. And horror constantly reflects society. Say when Kult came out in the 90s, the biggest scare around was HIV. That was the big play. You can die from having sex. You still can, but it's sort of bearable. And what is the big thing today? Now we're in a big sort of... Yeah, if you started writing something today, it wouldn't be relevant in 6 weeks. That's a tricky thing about this period. We have the COVID-19 pandemic. We have all these things from a European perspective. Both the British and the Americans have gone mad.
Americans are it's crazy here.
From European standpoint, it's like our parents has gone crazy.
Mm-hmm.
which is sort of a very, very weird, and we have no idea where this will land.
Mm-hmm.
So writing horror now, let's go back to some haunted house because that's a safe card.
Yeah, it's definitely feels safer.
Who cares about zombies at the moment or vampires? So I don't know really what the question might be. What was scary 2 years ago? Yeah, and I mean we have totally phased out the nuclear war. We're afraid of genetic manipulation, all these what do you call it, DNA stuff.
Yeah, splicing and yeah.
Where does that lead? Artificial intelligence. It might already be there.
You're talking to one now.
Yeah. Or is sitting here listening to us, and yeah.
It's so just Curtis.
And that is kind of I think we're in a very sort of transitive period that okay, we had a period from 9/11 to sort of the end of ISIS, where we know there was this scary thing going on over there, but after that, what's next? Trying to cope with the internet, which is of course a horror.
Yeah, it's everywhere, information going places you don't want it to go, your stuff being sold to people you don't know.
And what does all this means with all and stuff. So, which kind of nicely brings us back to Kult, that there's another thing I've written for them, which is called Ghost Follower at the moment. I don't even know if that is a proper American or English term, but it's kind of these...
We've heard it, yeah.
You can buy these ghost followers for Instagram. You can buy it. I can have 1,000 ghost followers, please. And they like it. You're done then. And I thought about it. I'm not that fond of nostalgia, so I wanted to do a modern cult story, today cult story. And it's about an advertising company who sort of sells their souls for all these followers. And for an Instagram betting site.
Yeah.
So it was, it got really ugly in a good way. And it was really nice to do it with sort of a contemporary theme instead of trying to be nostalgic and go back and see what's left of Hellraiser.
Yeah, and I think that's very important for writers, especially in horror, and for an intellectual property that's kind of been around for a while, is figuring out what is horror now. I love Hellraiser and The Thing and lots of the movies back when, but there are some amazing movies and media that's coming out right now that kind of has a unique take to horror. I mean, Jordan Peele with his movies have been a very eye-opening perspective for horror, and definitely love kind of watching everyone's interpretation of what is horror right now. And that Ghost Followers thing, that sounds creepy.
Yeah, I love this kind of because the problem is that the writers are old, and to ask someone in his 50s to say, can you please go and try to understand what these teens are doing on Skypogram or whatever they're on. We don't even know what platform they're using. I have no idea what my son, who is 20, is on when he talks to his friends.
It's certainly not MySpace. I think that website's still out.
He thinks Messenger, that's where you store senile people. So I haven't even figured that out. And for me to write in that setting, it takes some doing. And eventually I will come up with, let's do Stranger Things before the cell phones.
Yeah.
When my life was easier.
And today, everyone who's young is so integrated into technology. There was a time when where anyone was several feet away from any sort of signaling device, and now sitting here in my apartment, I'm probably a couple of meters from about 100 things that are giving off signals and communicating all over the world.
Yeah, and we talked about this. I talked with my wife about this yesterday. I'm monitoring 5 different electronic communications channels sort of on an hourly basis, and that's true, isn't it? But you talked about these modern horror movies. I like this Unfriended, which is one long Skype call. It's sort of it's not the end of the world or the most fantastic movie ever made, but it's really good because it's so true to the idea that this is a messenger or sort of Skype conversation.
Yeah,
people are coming and going and dying, and there's a ghost on Skype, literally, and it works in a brilliant way. And you sit there and think, when will they ever leave this screen mode? And they don't. And you stare at that screen for 90 minutes or something like that, and it worked.
Yeah, I mean, just because of the pandemic, most of my communications, and I think this is probably the same for everyone else, most of our communications with other human beings is via a screen.
Yeah, of course. And I had to switch to teach over Zoom. People joke about that. In a week, we did 20 years of technical sort of, how does this really work? Do I have to learn it now? So it was great. And my wife, who works at the School of Performing Arts in Stockholm, they had to have their students' films without people being there. So they had to figure out how to be in different rooms.
Whew. That's tough.
That was tough. We were really like, okay, now the light people will show up. The light person will show up. And do his thing.
Man.
And you leave the room, please.
that sounds crazy.
That was crazy, but they all restrictions forces people to be innovative.
Yeah,
and use the media. You suddenly you have stories that happen on Zoom because you're forced to work with Zoom instead of asking someone in my age who didn't quite get Zoom for. So it's been a great development, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of forced everyone to kind of update themselves on communication via the web.
Yeah, and especially sort of, I'm born in the 60s, and we had to update those kind of online behaviors. I wasn't that fossilized before, but
I think we have to talk about the scenario for the Kickstarter that's going on right now. Hell is Other People. First off, very evocative title for the scenario, but you can give us a synopsis and what you think this is bringing to the table.
The story, Hell is Other People, is based on a play called No Exit by Sartre, actually, the French philosopher, which is, of course, terribly pretentious and very cult. The notion is that everybody winds up in his private hell with 2 or 3 people which are sort of optimized to make your life miserable. This was the idea that if you with 3 people being sort of asked to join in for a ride in a limousine, and they're designed to wind each other up. And there's one of them has been stalking one of the other. One of the 2 of the other have a secret affair. There's actually one of the is Bishop and his strange daughter, who is sort of modeled on Sasha Grey or someone like that. And we have a very complicated story there. But then there's a driver who sort of leads the conversation on to new interesting topics. And how about this? And what do you feel about that? And in the end, one of them has to get out of the car. Who has to get out of the car? Yeah.
We're super excited to see this this story, Hell is Other People, in this very unique setting, because most TTRPG scenarios you're moving from place to place, but it sounds like the majority of it happens just within this limousine.
No, it's all taking place inside a car. With some props and a monster in the back, sort of in the trunk. I think when you've done stuff for a while, you start to, in order to keep yourself amused and perhaps relevant and challenged, you try to think, okay, how can I do this some other way? It's not necessarily that I have to be super creative and do everything backwards, but if you try deliberately to look at things from different angles, you might just find something that puts a new perspective on it.
Well, we are very excited to see it when it finally comes out. And of course, all this information, Kult Divinity Lost Kickstarter scenario, as well as Anders Fager's website, will be right down below for people to click on YouTube.
Yeah.
We totally look forward to the book coming out in English soon. But do you have any last parting final words?
Any final words? My final word.
Yes.
Don't hold your breath, but eventually we will get the Lovecraftian stuff out in English, and it will be worth waiting for, because it will drag Lovecraft screaming into the 21st century, to his surprise and disgust.
I held my breath as long as I could. That is super exciting. Like, what? That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it is great stuff. And I hope, thanks for your interest in the stuff we do. And it was great talking to you guys.
Yeah, you as well. And once again, people just down below, please support. And we would love to talk to you some other time. We definitely look forward to seeing more of your work out there.
Okay. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, America.